6th Dynasty. Before we start, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Archaeology has not yet revealed to us the origin of the rise of the 6th Dynasty, and it seems that its kings took over the rule of the country without a wave of revolutions or a major dispute. And its pharaohs remained on the throne of the king for nearly 2 centuries. Its founder is King Sehat-teb-Tawi-Tet. History has taught us at all times that every new founder must be a man of ruthlessness and strength. But the face mask that the archaeologist Kuibel found near the temple of the Pyramid of Tidi in Saqqara, his features indicate that that king was a soft-mannered man. Emotion, if it is true, that this mask worked similar to his face, not to another person. The historian Manitin attributes the origin of this family to Memphis, and he may have been somewhat correct in that. Because the 5th dynasty, all the tendencies of its kings were directed towards worshipping Ain Shams. As for the religious inclinations of the kings of the 6th dynasty, they were directed towards worshipping the god Fata in Memphis. 2 documents issued by the high priest of the god Fata in Memphis arrived to us, indicating that King Tidi was heading with his inclinations to organize the priesthood of Fata. And he actually carried out important reforms and changes in the system of priests. While there is also a painting in the British Museum engraved on it is a poem from this era in which the origin of all that appeared and hidden was attributed to the god Fata. And in Saqqara a tomb of a high priest of the god Fata was found during the reign of the king and people named Zabwabi. And he told us in his inscriptions that he served in the era of people then he became today, in the presence of the Son of the Sun, Tidi lived eternally, being the high priest of Fata. And respected by the king more than any other servant, and the priest of Fata the elder and the holder of the king's cup, and the chief of the king's secret matters everywhere. From this it becomes clear that the high priest of the god Fata in the New Testament had an excellent position close to the king, which he could not reach when the influence of Ain Shams was on the way in the country. This is until a statue of King Tidi was found with the inscription, Mabub Fata. It is very unfortunate that the Pyramid of Tidi was plundered by thieves. They burned everything on their way to the burial chamber and smashed the granite barriers. A series of inscriptions were inscribed on the walls of the burial chamber, many of them identical to what was found in the Wanas pyramid. These inscriptions were written in letters and signs smaller than those found in the Pyramid of Wanas, and only an arm and a shoulder escaped from the hand of thieves from the king's body. Manton mentioned to us that this king was killed by the guards, but we have no proof of that. However, the kings who came after him did not remain on the throne of the king except for a short period, and perhaps the reason for this was the lack of security. As usually happens when there is an army disobedience or internal revolts. During the reign of Tidi, Wani began his life, and he is considered one of the most important Egyptian employees in this era. He lived during the reign of several kings. He was buried in the Godmother, and he left for us there on one of the walls of his tomb the longest inscription about a person's life, and it is considered the most important historical document. It reached us from the old country. However, what he attained from the high status he reached during the era of the kings who will be mentioned later. He reached the rank of Emir, Governor of the South and Honorable, Viceroy of Nikan, Master of Elite, and the only Samir. Wani told us about himself in the era of Tet, saying, "I was a child who was still wearing a belt during the reign of King Tet, and my job was the manager of the plantation house, and I held the position of manager of the royal palace's estate." The rule of Tidi was followed by a mysterious era that may have been caused by the turmoil that occurred after his murder if Manitin believed us. All we know about this period is that the list of kings with the Godmother mentioned to us the name of a king who succeeded Tidi, about which we know nothing at all, which is Secret Kara. On the other hand, we found an inscription from this age in Wadi Hammamat of a king named it, in which it was stated that an official named Fatankau came to this side with 200 archers and 200 stone throwers to cut stones for the pyramid of King It. Some historians have thought that Visarkara and It is the name of one king, and we do not know the number of years of this king's reign, and it is possible that he did not succeed Tidi. since he did not mention him to us among the kings who lived during their era, especially since he mentioned them to us in the historical order. And perhaps not mentioning him was for a reason we do not know. King Bibi I. After this ambiguity appeared on the throne of the country a young king called Bibi. And he kept holding the reins of affairs in the country with strength and determination for nearly half a century. And he is rightly considered one of the greatest pharaohs who seized the corner of the situation in Egypt in all eras of its history with firmness and vigor. Indeed, he did not leave us documents indicating his works such as Ramesses II or Ahmose I, O God, except for the inscriptions of Enmi. But we would replace that with the traces he left and the carvings of the quarries and artifacts he left and the great men who lived in his time, which shed some light on his reign and the great deeds that happened in him, and it seems that he was dear to the members of his flock. Many of them are called by his name, and he may have been similar in that to Thutmose III, although the similarity here is slight due to the distance between them of time. But despite all this, the evidence for things predict that Bibi was loved in the eyes of his people, and that he was the grumpy pharaoh among the kings of his family. A statue of Io was found for him in the precision of its manufacture of copper, and we should not be exaggerating, its manufacture exceeds all the statues made before it, even those found by Khafre and Menkaure, and it is without dispute one of the greatest treasures that archaeologists have found in our time. And the archaeologist Kopel uncovered him, along with another small statue of the same metal, when he was digging in the town of Hierakonpolis. It seems that the two statues are related to one person, and some archaeologists thought that they represent Bibi himself and his son, Prince Merenra, who was directly behind his father, or that Prince Neferkara Bibi II represents, but Professor Flinders Petrie considers that the two statues they belong to King Bibi himself, so that he leaves the choice for his mate to wear the king's body when he is young or at his age. Some historians think that Bibi is the son of King It, especially if we know that Queen Abet or Bibi was not the husband of Tidi, one of the buildings he built or repaired throughout the country, and there is no dispute that the original Bibi buildings have disappeared due to rebuilding them in the ages that followed. But despite that, we find some remnants of his remains still present. It was found for him in Tanis, Tel Basta, Al Araba, and Dendera, and it was found on monuments engraved with his name. This is due to the fact that he left inscriptions on rocks all the way to Lower Nubia. It seems that Bibi was not successful in the interior of his house. We find an indication in the inscriptions Wani that the king ordered the trial of his wife Emetz before a special court formed for this purpose. But we do not know anything other than this reference, and history has left us in the darkness of the reason for this trial and the nature of the crime that she committed. And it is not far from she wanted to conspire against the king, jealousy of her when she saw that he had married two other women, each of them under the name of Meriranx. In any case, we will remain ignorant of the secret forever, or we will find a trace that reveals the mask on this mysterious secret. And he was in charge of this trial, as I mentioned, Wani, and he alluded to her in his inscriptions with all cleverness and skill without condemning the queen to innocence or criminality. And after that we did not hear about her in the inscriptions, either evil or good. As for the other two wives of the king, they were two sisters, and they were also women. Two great descendants of a hereditary prince and ruler, and a priest named Koi and his wife Nebet. It seems that the property of their family was in the buried godmother, and each of them gave birth to an heir to the king. It is not surprising if we find the brother of these two queens, who is attributed to the family of princes by heredity, has enriched a great deal and became one of the state's greatest titles. So Tiborza, the brother of the two queens,